Welcome to Money Matters. I'm Tom Spottiswood of River Bay Investment Group, Wells Fargo Advisors Financial Network. We're based in Gaithersburg, Maryland. And today I'm very excited to have on our show today Louise Phillips Forbes. She's a very successful real estate agent up in New York City, and she's here today to talk about the trends and in New York and how it could affect you. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for having me on the show today.
I'm really excited, and it was fun seeing you up in New York last month. So
absolutely.
I know you had a little bit of adventure on the Amtrak coming down here. So.
Well, I'm here.
All right, good. That's the important thing. Tell us a little bit about your background, your company, what you do, and how you got involved in the market, if you can, please.
Yes, I am an executive vice president at Halstead Property, which is one of the few privately held family-owned companies of real estate, and I've been in real estate for 22 years. I always say I fell off the boat from Nashville, Tennessee. I came to New York to dance.
Right.
And like most people in real estate, we kind of end up in the back door, and here I am today.
Excellent. And it was interesting when we first met, and you said that it might be what's going on in the New York City market might be a great story or a great learning lesson for what's going on for people here in D.C. and the rest of the country. Your positioning, or you see New York City position as a vanguard or forefront of what's happening in regards to the real estate return as we're coming out of this recession, hopefully.
Sure. I think that really places like Washington and New York might be somewhat isolated, but also where the rest of the country has their eyes on us, because they're looking for that trickle effect. So we have a lot of things that have positioned both of our markets. I'm not as familiar with Washington, but certainly in the news, and what I'm learning is that you're ahead of the curve in your recovery.
Yes.
And if it's going to be compared to the nation.
That's correct. So what do you see happening in New York that's different? How do you see that the New York City market is recovering, and how does it reflect on what's happening here?
Well, it is, I mean, what I've listen, when Lehman collapsed and when the financial markets collapsed, we had a pause button in 2009. If you look at just myself, if I average 7 transactions a month,
right,
it's a lot of business for an individual. Well, we did 50% less than that, and I seem to be, carrying the torch for my company.
Right, sure.
So if you, with that through 2009, it was frozen. So what we're seeing today, we had a reset of the market of about probably 20%. And even today, if you look closer, deals that are in contract that have not been recorded are only 10 to 13% off the market. Higher end specifically.
What do you attribute that to? I mean, what's happening? What's different? Or what do you see? Why are things getting better? I guess is the easy question.
They're not easier, but there has been pent up desire, meaning, my market as well as Washington's, they are user assets. People want to be homeowners. However, interestingly enough, of New York's market, 66% of that market is comprised of rental product. I don't know exactly what it is to Washington, but nationally, 2/3 of the people in Nashville, Tennessee own their homes. Well, only 1/3 of New Yorkers own their homes. And I'm talking Manhattan proper. And so first of all, I've eliminated 2/3 of the market of who I'm selling to.
Sure.
And so I think that I have less vacancy rate. I have cash is always king, and cash is king here as well, because there are a lot of people that have been sitting on the sidelines waiting to buy back in the market, coupled with second home buyers from people that are empty nesters in Connecticut, Washington. I have people from Washington that are trying to buy a second home in New York City.
Sure.
So we have a second home buyer, we have foreign buyers, and we have the highest concentration of cash deals in the nation.
So do you see that it's in New York again? I don't know if it's really the case in D.C., but I think you have an interesting point that shows money matters. I don't know that much about real estate, but I had a conversation with somebody earlier, and he said that renting is really become, like you had just said, renting's become more popular, and I think the people with the money, they're buying housing units here to rent, and the people aren't, they don't want to become an owner. And do you think that's necessarily a bad thing?
I think what the bad thing from the standpoint that somebody wants to become an owner and they can't, or they're, tell me, just three questions.
Renting overall. I mean, it seems like the promise of government over the last 20 years for everyone to own their own home. Maybe that experiment didn't work out. So
Well,
maybe a renter isn't that bad an idea. Maybe New York has it right. Maybe 1/3 people should own, and maybe 2/3 should rent. I don't know.
Well,
Can
I
you
think,
talk to that?
Yeah, I mean, I think that, you know, when I was growing up, my parents worked, they were Depression kids, and they worked for our home and for our education. And I think that the idea of one wanting to own is still
American
the first
dream.
choice. It's
Yeah.
the American dream. New York specifically, I also feel like people want a piece of the rock.
Right.
And
Big Apple.
however, I think with what's happened with the financial markets and buying into that market, here's an interesting equation that I was just thinking about, because I'm working with somebody who's in their 30s. They've been working for a decade. They've saved a lot of money. They make a lot of money. So what do they need in order to buy into my market?
Okay, that's a good question. Okay.
So what is it, you know, I mean, I've been renting, I'm paying $4,500, I have no tax deduction for a one-bedroom apartment. So what can I do with that money? Can I buy something?
Sure.
So we just did this whole analysis. The average one-bedroom for a condominium is $820,000. So if they're budgeting an $800,000 buy, they have to put 25% down, and they have 5% closings cost. So now you're pushing just to invest to buy $300,000 for a 30. I didn't have $300,000 when I was 30.
Right.
Just for the record.
Right.
And so then the banking requirements today are forcing us to have liquidity accessible for at least 12 months and sometimes 20 months.
Sure, it's much stricter.
So renting becomes a nice choice if you're not that person.
If you're not willing, if you don't have that much flexibility, you don't have that much
Right.
money. Okay, okay.
So I mean, I think that becomes a conversation with each individual, and with that goal in mind, because remember that, in my opinion, $4,500 is actually after-tax money, so it's really the equivalent of $9,000.
Yeah.
So you're just working to live.
That's incredible. I think that's a big wake-up call too, because $800,000 you can buy a nice single family here in most areas of DC.
So you guys got it really good.
Right.
I should be coming here.
You
You know any real estate brokers here?
You're invited. You're invited. Would you say in New York it's a tale of two cities, that there is the high-end market and everyone else? Do you see that? I mean, the numbers you're just throwing out show that it's
Listen,
expensive. I mean, this is a big wake-up call for the DC market, because people are like, oh, well, the prices are real high, but they say, hey, well, look, compared to some other places in the country, it sounds almost reasonable.
Well, I mean, there's some interesting numbers if we look at them statistically. Just on an average co-op. Do you all even have a co-op market here?
Not really.
So co-op is the idea of having a building that each individual has shares of it, like
Sure.
a business. And so 70% of my market are co-ops. And so there's anyone coming into the market that is an outsider, foreigners, second home buyers from Washington, you know, they don't quite understand what co-ops are, but
Sure.
they learn that they have an expanded choice if they're open to them. And I think that the average co-op is around $1,070,000, and the average condo is $1,750,000. So with that piece of information, you understand what kind of requirements from cash is needed.
Yeah, it's significantly more.
And interestingly enough, I just, coming down here, I was like, well, what are some average numbers that people are, because we have the mean across the city. 158 transactions right now in New York City are in contract, haven't closed yet, from January to current. The average of those are co-ops and condos. The average is 8.4 million of 158 transactions, the high being 28 million.
Outstanding.
Townhouses, single-family homes, there are 47 of them in contract throughout, and this is Manhattan only, not Brooklyn. Not,
Right.
The average is 7.4, and the high being 33 million.
Incredible.
So there's an appetite for real estate. I mean, I find it just like people at cocktail parties, they want to talk about real estate and what's going on, what's the new company, what's the new edge of business that they can buy into, some stock or some investment of a
Sure.
company. They want to talk about that the same way they want to talk about real estate.
Very good. Why don't we hold right there?
Sure.
We'll be right back after this public service announcement. Please stay tuned. Welcome back to Money Matters and our discussion with Louise Phillips Forbes from New York on the lessons in the real estate market that they can share with us from there. Okay, so we talked a little bit about the extreme prices compared to the rest of the country that you're experiencing up in New York, and that it seems like, and you've bottomed out there. So are increases in rents having an effect on the pricing?
Well, I think that there's certainly partially a cause and effect, meaning it's cost so much to buy into the market.
Sure.
Renting is an option, and there's more of them. In other words, many people are selling their apartments and
Sure.
saying, let's wait. I'm going to sell my apartment, I'm going to buy in the next 12 months.
That's happening here too. I'm sorry to interrupt, that's happening here too, but go ahead.
I think we have very similar market. I mean, they're complemented.
Maybe the scale is different, but they reflect each other quite well.
Absolutely, I think they're a mirror to one another. I think that the increase in rent market causes people to get up and see what their money will buy them. Mm-hmm. And in many cases, they realize it's not as easy as it used to be.
Sure.
It's going to cost me more money, but after tax, I'm owning something instead of renting. So instead of paying $4,500 a month rental, I can actually pay $6,000, get the deduction, and it's costing me the same.
And they're actually gaining something there.
So there's a cause and effect that the rental market is causing people to rethink. I mean, people don't move because it's convenient, ever, because who has time? But they do it because, one, they can, or job opportunity, and there have been a ton of jobs that have been, like the government expansion here.
The economy's pretty solid here in the D.C. area in Montgomery County just because of the government. The government is well, they've been the buyer of last resort, so
Mm-hmm.
they're the funding of first resort right now in this downturn. But you could say the same thing's happened in New York. I mean the financial markets, but they've recovered fairly well. And tourism's always very strong too.
We have our tourism has been certainly when the economy shifts, it's affected and it impacts. It's a domino effect. But we have a mixing pot of opportunities because we have a strong, finance, obviously the financing market, but the entertainment market. You have business services, tons of entrepreneurial small companies that are budding and taking commercial space and moving people. I have a company that I'm working with that just took, 60,000 square feet, and they're moving, 17 people from Chicago.
Oh, really? Okay, so that's significant. Would you say that New Yorkers are, and I'm not in the real estate market. We do some of these TV shows. Would you say New Yorkers are pretty real estate savvy? You mentioned it's cocktail party talk, and I would say that again, DC, the people are relatively savvy. It's top of mind in many discussions.
Well, I think that first of all, I think of New York. Successful New Yorkers that have been, whether they leave their hometowns to come and work at Goldman Sachs, or they want to start a salon and they're cutting hair on Madison Avenue, no matter what your background is, you've arrived when you're successful in a place like that. So you're savvy innately. So the access to information that the internet has provided us has just made a transformation in less than a decade. So is
that a good or a bad thing? Because again, in my business, that it's very similar to what's happening in my business.
Well,
you got to shift the way before you're the guardian of the information, or you're the transporter of the information. But now it's like you have to parse the information for them. You have to give them the right choices. Does that make sense?
Yes. I mean, I am a fan of information because it depends on what your philosophy is. I mean, I come from a place of where I've always believed that I don't really sell real estate, that my job is to educate. Because if you're looking for, I understand you're looking for a house today.
Yes.
And your gut is your biggest monitor. It's your thermostat. So how somebody gives you this information and helps process it to what's important to you is truly the key to being successful. Because just like in selecting your wife, I
can sell my house. I can't sell my wife.
Yeah. No, but the truth
I'd like
is,
to sometimes, but that's a little bit. It's not
it's
really an
Friday.
option.
You're not out. You're not in the doghouse.
Right.
But no, truly, that selection process is a very personal process, and your instinct and your gut is going to govern it. And so, how someone is given information and walks you through it, just like, why should I buy this stock or not, and why should I in relationship to my portfolio?
Right.
So I think I'm a friend of the internet.
I agree. To me, I love having an educated consumer is perfect
It's
to work with.
dynamo. So
Sometimes it's overload. It's like too much information, and you got to provide context. And I think that's the key thing. And I think this show is good because it's providing some context of what else is out there. You know, real estate's all local. It's local, and sometimes in DC, as I'm sure Manhattan, you feel like you're living in the center of the universe. So it's good to see what else. What's the other center of the universe is going on?
Sure.
What's the other end of the galaxy doing? These two markets have experienced less pain during the recession. All right. When do you see things starting to? I would say things have leveled out, and in DC is the only market that's actually improved slightly. When do you see things starting to really bustle along? Do you see that happening soon, or what's your projection? I mean, and you're a soldier in the trenches, I would say.
Sure, and I guess our recovery. I mean, we're ahead of schedule. I am cautiously confident. And again, I'm basing people's moves and decisions based on their own information about where they are in their lives. I mean, if my friends say, should I be selling my apartment? I was like, well, are you having any more kids?
Huh.
You're not having more kids.
Why?
Why can't you just stay where you are? But I want to be closer to school. Okay, so you have a motivation. So those transitions, it's expensive to move. You know, the cost to sell an apartment, minimum, before you even talk about moving, is 8 to 10%. So as it is to buy, it's expensive, in selling. So I think that we, like the Washington market, being a user asset, meaning my investor, this is something that we were talking about for the rental market, unlike the rest of the nation, Miami, Las Vegas, California, their investor concentration is anywhere from 40 to 60%.
Yeah.
I have less than 6%.
Sure.
So and Washington's similar.
Yes.
And when you are renting, you're renting quality because the people want a quality of life. They're coming from usually being homeowners. I mean, my friends that came here that are working in Obama's administration, are renting, and they're renting from an owner because it was the right thing for that owner to do and right for them.
Let's switch here a little bit. International buyers are still attracted to the New York City market. They see it as a safe haven. Do you want to talk about that?
I mean, I have, yes, I think that we're seeing as I think unfortunately the Standard & Poor's has shifted its rating for New York, but it's actually how Europeans look at their opportunity of buying a piece of the rock while it's down.
And the dollar's weak too.
Yeah.
So they come in and they say, look, they're looking at this as a compelling buy from their perspective, or the Asian market or the European market.
It's a timing that if we've only been affected 20%, even 13% in some cases that we're seeing today, well, with the weaker dollar, the stronger euro, or whatever their exchange is, it's a long-term buy. I have people that are in Asia, their children are 13, and everyone for generations, they come here to be educated.
I know.
So they're buying because even if they don't go to Columbia, they want that investment.
It's not just the real estate, it's everything else that's involved in it. It's not the building, it's the whole lifestyle. Okay, that's good. Why don't we hold right there?
Sure.
Okay. We'll be right back after this public service announcement. Please stay tuned. Welcome back to Money Matters, our discussion with Louise Phillips Forbes on the New York real estate market and the lessons it has for us here in DC and across the country. So let's talk about some more nuts and bolts stuff. I think we got a good feel, and I think it's interesting that we were able to show how there's some, maybe scale is different, but there's definitely some similarities between the two markets. Why don't you, nuts and bolts, what's going on with Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac? What do you see? They've been talking about the possible dissolution of the two, so what do you see happening?
Well, I don't think that's going to happen anytime soon. I mean, let's look at pre-Lehman. The market share that Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac owned was 40%. which is pretty substantial, but
Yes.
40%. Today, it's anywhere from 90 to
Oh, my
93%.
word.
So we're grateful they're here, but what's happening is that in the aftermath of the collapse of the for Lehman and Wall Street and the sort of putting it back together, there was an overcompensation of bottlenecking that nobody wanted to sign a loan document.
Yes, yes.
I don't know if that happened for you, but it happened for us.
Right.
Then the government stepped in and said, well, let's reform appraising because there's a conspiracy. I'm sure the real estate broker, the bank, and the appraiser are in cahoots together, so let's put some infrastructure in. Well, in principle, that's a fabulous idea.
Right.
However, now what happens is the bank, the lender, takes the application and then they farm out the appraisal to a state-certified individual that one, in my case, might have never even been, I mean, I've gotten a phone call from somebody going, I'm sorry, where's Madison Avenue?
Right, right, right.
He's coming in from Cooperstown.
Uh-huh.
He doesn't have any understanding of the nuances.
Sure, sure.
So, in principle, that reform is great, but we're finding that in the everyday practices, it's providing some challenges for us. But luckily for New York, we have enough traction and velocity in our market that those appraisals today can get thrown out, and those bids don't go out to that zip code.
Well, you've been quoted saying the market is extremely efficient. Talk about that. What are the factors that you see make it efficient?
Well,
And you see that in New York. Well, and again, I know you were talking about New York market. Do you see that in D.C.? Do you see that in other areas? What do you see?
Well, I'm going to come back. I want to come back to that
Okay,
because
okay.
I want to finish on Fannie
Go
Mae
ahead,
and
sorry,
Freddie
go
Mac. I just think that there's something really that everyone in the nation is challenged with this. So we have this government protocol and requirements that they are putting banks under in order to be able to have a secondary market by them.
Yes.
Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac. So there's so many requirements. So there's it's putting pressure for banks and lenders to over-document, make sure that the reserves are way extra cushion, even with what's not even required, because in the risk analysis of an individual or of a building might get thrown out from Freddie Mac and Fannie Mae.
Sure.
So I think that while we're all happy they're here because it's created a flow of people being able to actually be loaned for money to be loaned to individuals, it's got a catch-22 that doesn't address regional nuances to the market. So what's happening, in D.C. proper, what's outside of D.C., maybe other than Montgomery, there might be areas that don't have any transactions that are occurring that Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, their requirements aren't going to change to a supply and demand market.
Okay, okay.
So I just think that we're happy they're here. I don't think they're going anywhere. The idea of eliminating mortgage tax deductions is never going to fly.
It's not going to fly.
But I think they're going to be rigorous with income verification, asset proof, cushion. So for the buyer, for Washington and New Yorkers, they really need to pay attention to their own credit and their cushion.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. So let's go back to an efficient market. What do you see that's making the market efficient, and how can we take it? How can buyers and sellers take advantage of that?
So, well, I mean, talking to appraisals is they are going to be a cause and effect. So if I can sell an apartment for a certain amount of money that I can't actually get it to appraise, then I need to be selective on who my buyer is. I want a buyer that doesn't need a mortgage because if you understand, because if I've got 6 people bidding on a piece of property, which I currently have right now in a case in the city, I'm looking for the cash buyer because I can't even track the increase in the last 3 months of the market for supply and demand.
Okay, but do you see, I'm just curious, is it that competitive? Do you see that situation come up that often?
In the last quarter,
okay.
I have seen a sense of optimism. Interest rates are lower, 25 basis points. I mean, they had a little peak for 4 weeks ago, but those 25 basis points, if you're taking a 30-year loan and you're borrowing, whether you're borrowing $600,000, $400,000, or $1 million, 25 basis points over 10 years can be some money. It takes somebody off the sidelines, or if you're on the fence, they'll lock it up because their rate lock matters.
Sure.
So from the circumstances of our market and its efficiency, pricing makes a difference more today than ever, because I have people all the time, sellers will say, well, can't we just ask this and then let them make an offer? If you are the savvy New Yorker, my experience is the access to information. They know what's sold in the building peak pre-Lehman, post-Lehman, because everyone's looking to the peak of the market for what things, to establish their own interpretation of value.
It's all about context. You're right. That's very interesting.
So if you're looking at a house down the street and your friend bought the house next door, what did they pay in the peak of the market? It'll reflect on what you're prepared to pay today.
It's unbelievable. You're absolutely right. It's all about context, and that's how they buy stocks. That's how they mutual funds. Well, it was worth this then, and they anchor on that price.
Right.
And it might be right or wrong, but who cares? I mean, it's the value. It's today.
And the buying power of interest rates are playing into many people's thought process.
All right, well, if someone wanted to, we got to wrap up. This has been a great discussion. If someone wanted to find out a little bit more about the New York real estate market or about your company, where would they go? Do you have a website? Or? Everyone has a website.
Everyone has a website, but I can be found at www.halsteadproperty.com. And it's Louise Phillips Forbes. I'm an executive vice president.
All right, thank you very much. We really appreciate you coming on the show.
Thank you.
It's been a real pleasure.
Thank you.
All right, and thank you very much for tuning in. We appreciate your comments. We've been getting a lot of questions and subject topic issues that people want to see on the show. If you want to contact us, you can reach us on the internet. We have a website too. It's River Bay Investment Group, and look forward to seeing you next week. Remember, your money matters.